Like we always do at this time. What up, what up, what up, everybody? Welcome to the True Colors Podcast. This is episode 11, and we're really, really excited to be going with you guys, being live with you all. It has been a crazy, crazy week. So I'm rocking the hoodie. I'm rocking the Holla If You Hear Me hoodie. This was the first show of my True Colors tenure. So I'm really, really excited to be rocking it. But just know that this is crazy underneath here. So this is what you get because it's been a long week and I'm tired. But I'm really, really excited, though, about getting up with you all and having an opportunity to use our platform and talk about stuff that's happening in the Atlanta theater community. And I'm really, really excited to be joined today by Maesha McQueen. She's an amazing theater artist here and has been doing her thing for a very long time in the Atlanta.
Without further ado, let me please introduce our guest for episode 11 of the True Colors Podcast, Miss Maesha McQueen. Maesha, what up, girl?
Hi.
Hey. Thank you so much for being with us today. I
I'm so
appreciate it.
happy to see you. I feel like I haven't seen anybody in my community in like a minute.
Right, we've been hella distant, man, because we
I
have to
know.
be. We
Because
have
we
to
have
be.
to do.
Remind everybody, COVID is still a thing. While we appreciate everybody doing their thing, being in the streets, raising your voice, if you're
Yep.
going to be there, please wear a mask.
Yep.
I know it's impossible to social distance in those protests, but please wear a mask.
Yeah.
The worst thing that could happen right now, or maybe the best thing for the oppressor, is for all of us to get sick with COVID while we're out there proclaiming the need for our rights to be protected, right? So,
Mhm.
Maisha, man, I want to get right to it. As a Atlanta transplant, I am always learning about the city. But one thing I do know, and has been made very, very clear, that YEA is strong. You guys have a deep, deep, deep presence in the Atlanta theater community. That YEA Mafia is strong. Maisha, tell us, man, you've been making art in Atlanta for a minute. Talk to us about how you found your voice through YEA and then what that set you up for.
So, I'm elated to be here. I'll just say that. And you're one of my favorite people, so I'll try not to blush as I'm talking. So the Youth Ensemble of Atlanta, which is YA is the acronym for that,
Mm-hmm.
was established by Freddie Hendrix, who is sort of a living legend, and he's a name that kind of floats around the global theatrical
Mm-hmm.
industry. And he was the person who sort of broadened my horizons as far as artistry was concerned. I grew up singing. My father was a singer. I didn't necessarily grow up singing in church, which a lot of people assume, but I just was influenced by music, choral music. My father was a music major, and he introduced me to Handel's Messiah and things of that nature. I was always involved in chorus, and then I I ended up going to Tri-Cities High School of the Visual and Performing Arts. I'm laughing because there are people in New York who I'll meet. I'm going to shout out Camille Brown, and I remember meeting
Yeah,
her,
Camille.
being like, if I hear one more thing about Tri-Cities High School
Man, y'all
and
deep.
or the Youth Ensemble of Atlanta, and it's just like, I don't know what to tell you.
Y'all
There,
deep, man. Y'all are deep.
we are super deep, and there was just an era. I started attending Tri-Cities High School in '94, graduated in '98. Freddie, I want to say, had been the theater teacher at Tri-Cities as well as the founder of the Youth Ensemble of Atlanta. So where YEA kind of started as this grassroots, and still is, but its intention was to create stories that were told from the sort of the ground up. And then he went to Tri-Cities High School and was teaching there, and he saw this plethora of talent, and he just started grabbing us. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll throw out some names: Jahi Kier, Saquon Sembla, Keenan Thompson, Candy Burrs, Juanita Woodjet, D Woods, Chanel Woodjet, Jewel Lane. Like, the list just goes on and on. Saw Gouger. I know, it's really Neil Gann, Ena
Ena
King.
King.
I mean, it's just, and that's only the tip of the iceberg. So I have some friends that I still keep in contact with who went to Tri-Cities High School with me and were chorus majors when I began. And they always have this thing. They love Freddie, but they're like, he took all the kids from chorus. We had this musical theater class.
Yeah.
And that is sort of where kids from dance, art, visual arts, theater, acting and singing sort of came together. And that is when my eyes were open to the idea that as a vocalist, which is what I considered myself to be at 15 years old, that there was this other world where I could sort of transform, and I didn't have to be confined by the sort of rules of the vocal world, how you sound, and all of those are entities that affect storytelling, but it was just an unlocking for me and a liberation for me as an artist. And the biggest thing that Freddie instilled in me, which kind of started to create my tension and exploration of racial trauma, is my first musical was Godspell. We did Godspell in my freshman year. Sal Gouger was Jesus. Neil Gant was in it, Jahi, David Cote, Christine Horn, and that was my first musical. I didn't know what white musicals versus Black musicals were. That language wasn't used. Typecasting, this is a show that is for white kids, or this is a show. We just did whatever we wanted to do. And so, we can talk a little bit more about, sort of my journey in going to NYU and how there was a huge culture shift for me. But that's pretty much how I was introduced to the world of theater.
Yeah, well, girl, you better give me a transition. Well, then let's talk about how you got there. So you had the opportunity. You did the work with YEA, and then you move away, and you
Yes.
go to NYU.
Yes.
And the world looks a little different at
A lot
NYU than it
A
does
lot different.
at the Youth Ensemble of Atlanta.
Yeah. And granted,
Go ahead.
I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead. No. Well, I just want to talk about, like, what is, right now there's a lot of conversation happening around Black bodies inside white spaces and the trauma that that we undergo in there, but also the value of having our own separate spaces, whether they be our training centers, whether they be our professional theaters, what have you. Before we get there, let's just talk about, you were raised, grew up, trained in understanding and loving your aesthetic and knowing how to put all of the facets of music theater together, the dance, the voice, the acting, and you're doing it in a really amazingly grounded way, thanks to the amazing Freddie Hendrix. And then you go to NYU, and that's not the shit on NYU. There's a great training program in there, right? But how do you mesh the two? That's really what I want to ask you about. Talk about bringing those two learning styles together.
Well, to be quite transparent, I didn't. I didn't mesh it well. Anybody who's in the commercial musical theater world will tell you that the conversation around meshing is still very new within that space. So going to NYU and being a part of their musical theater program, which is a decision that I made consciously, because when I decided my senior year that I wanted to pursue this professionally, I came from a very high achieving family. So the decision was, okay, you go to the best institution for it. I could have gone to Spelman. I had a full ride to Florida State University, but I just was like, I want to be in New York. And so in making that decision, I just assumed naively that the way that I was introduced to this art form was the way that it was. Then I get to this PWI, and for the first time in my life, I hear, these are the roles that are right for you. These are the songs that are right for you. This is the body that's right for you. I didn't fit because what I know now, and what I'm able to sort of, even while carrying my trauma, navigate through, because my trauma is always with me, is that the history of American musical theater is deeply rooted in racism. If you have any understanding of the history of theater, but especially musical theater, which comes out of the vaudeville aesthetic, you still will
Which
see,
comes out of the minstrel show.
which comes out of the minstrel show. You still, to this day in 2020, can sort of line up every role that has been specifically targeted as Black women, and they're either Aunt Jemima or Jezebel. You might put a little bit of colorings in there, but at the end of the day, they are either asexual, heavy set, and know the answer to everybody's problems except their own, or
Magical.
they are over sexualized and, you know, X, Y, and Z. And so as a as a Black girl from College Park who grew up in a two-family home, who was blessed to be exposed to so many different things, I felt small, I felt confused, conflicted. And so the only thing that I knew how to do, because I wanted to be successful, is do whatever I could to fit into what it is that they wanted me to be. Here's a beautiful thing about NYU and a lot of other very sort of academically esteemed PWIs. While I was going through this sort of culture shock at the musical theater program, because NYU is such a strong liberal arts school, I was taking Intro to African American Studies. Shout out to Beth Turner. Shout out to Daniel Banks. Shout out to, I mean, all of these professors.
Daniel Banks, say that name.
Daniel Banks, man. He was a pioneer at NYU in terms of exposing, you know, young Black artists and artists of color to, you know, and he had his own fight with getting his PhD at NYU. That's a story he can tell. But there were these teachers that just sort of held us down at the time. Mary Campbell Schmidt, who is now the president of Spelman College, was the dean of Tisch at NYU, Black woman. And so you had sort of these figures that sort of would kind of look you in the eye and be like, are you okay? And you'd be like, no, but this is the same, but I'm at NYU the same time that that all of this other very provocative work was coming out of ETW, the Experimental Theater Wing. And so I had the opportunity to sort of kind of peek out the door of this conservatory of musical theater and say, what else is it that I'm interested in? So while I could go on and on and on about the experiences that I had, I mean, as a Black person in this country, it's like, you can't even count the amount of micro and macro. I personally don't think that there's anything, aggression can't be micro, in my opinion.
Word.
Aggression is always macro.
Amen.
You know, and so it's like you lose count. You know what I mean? So and what's beautiful right now is as I'm kind of peeking on and off IG, I'm seeing so many Black people in my profession who are truth telling and talking about instances where, and they're only touching the surface. I'll give you, you know, it's like, I'll just share this one thing with you that happened in this one show on this one day. Take that, multiply it by all of the shows I've ever done, multiply it by all the days that I rehearsed there and all the, you know what I mean? So to go back to what you were saying, I think that NYU was in general a blessing for me because it provided me the space to sort of see these two worlds collide. My response to it was to totally reject commercial theater altogether. By the time I graduated from NYU, you could have called me Angela Day. I was like, F the institution. I don't want to do anything that is not centered around Blackness. I started my own theater company, co-founded it with a woman named Crystal Trescott. It's called Progress Theater. It's still running today. But we did shows called Peaches and Memba, PS 122, the National Black Theater Festival. We were part of sort of that early hip hop theater movement with Camilla Forbes and all of that. And that was my response to the trauma. I didn't see how the worlds meshed.
That's great, man. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I do want to shout out, you got a lot of Freddie kids, a lot of a lot of your siblings are popping up here in the comment section. So we appreciate it for everyone who's just tuning in. It's True Colors Podcast, episode 11. I'm here with Maesha McQueen, and we're getting into it, man. We talked about your Atlanta theater journey. We talked about the opposition, at least the cognitive dissonance of the NYU training program and growing up and how you were raised in the art form. But now let's talk about, because we spoke about it just a little bit, man. This moment, artists they're fed up, and they are using their platforms, especially social media, the power of the viral posts, to talk about it, to reclaim that space and to speak out about it. I'm not asking you to use this moment, but I want to know, how does it feel for you to see that, to witness your colleagues speaking their truth?
Well, it's one of those things, Jamil, where it's like, this is what we talk about all the time. All of my Black friends who are on Broadway, off Broadway, regional theater, whatever, these are our private conversations. We have found a Black space, if you will, to sort of talk about this stuff. So this is not a new conversation for us by any means. It's almost like the cat is sort of out the bag in a particular way. My philosophy is this: we can thank Corona for this moment.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say this is because Corona got everyone still. Corona close the gaps between those who thought they had and those who didn't. 1 in 4 people are on unemployment right now.
Yep.
We are all relying on each other, social media. Our eyes are just opened in a different way. So for me, it's sort of an interesting thing because none of this is new for me. Black bodies being killed in the street, I've been talking about it since I was a kid. The level of race, and it's not this is old news. I think this is a beautiful time, and it makes me feel it's a proud moment for me, but I also feel that I am still waiting, in a sense, for people to talk about the other side. I feel like we've been truth-telling for a very long time. I am looking, and I think that there's a boldness that comes, for saying it out loud. If you felt like you would risk ruffling feathers or not being cast, to say it out loud. If that's your journey, then that's great. I am still waiting on non-Black people in my profession, not to call me or text me and ask me how I'm doing, but to post and say, I remember that one time I heard that wig designer make a derogatory comment about that Black girl's hair, and it made me feel uncomfortable. And I didn't say anything. I remember when we were demonizing a Black ensemble member because we thought they were standoffish, and I didn't understand that they were really trying to protect themselves from a space where they were the minority. I remember when I dubbed this Black girl as having an attitude, and I didn't realize that she was being racially, all of those things. I remember when I read that review and it said, and it gave all the other actors accolades for their wittiness, but then it just kind of condensed the Black woman's comedic timing to a natural aesthetic. Those are the things that I'm talking about, that I've experienced as what I would say a skilled actor, where, I'm a waitress in a musical with 2 other women, and it's her vulnerability, her comedic timing, her sass.
Say it.
And so I tell that story all the time. I talk about this to my white friends, my Black friends, my brown friends. I am waiting for white artists who are smart, who are perceptive. I get it. Privilege allows you to be blind, but you ain't that damn blind. You're walking this with me. I got some woke white friends who are still afraid, and so I think that woke to a certain degree, but I think that that's what I'm waiting on, because I still feel like we're doing too much of the heavy lifting, and that's why so many people who kind of walk this walk, I'm noticing a lot of us are just kind of not disconnected in this space and time. I think we're just trying to maintain a certain level of mental and emotional health, because this is what we talk about every day. So so that's what we're trying to navigate. And I'm just waiting for, as a community of white and Black people, because we know that's pretty much how America operates. This is a shared history. This is a shared trauma. This isn't I'm your ally because I'm watching what's been done to you. We all looked at the picture of George Floyd. We're talking about how it felt to look like George Floyd. Where's the conversation from my white friends, my white counterparts, about what it felt like to look like the person who had the knee on the neck?
Yeah. You saying some real, man. If people thought we was gonna come on here and skirt around the issues, they got the wrong ones on here today. Maesha, I very, very much appreciate what you're saying, and because of your perspective, I think in the last several days I've been in spaces with other producers, predominantly white producers, and talking about the need to speak up. And what I'm really interested in what you're saying, and I want to spend a little bit of time dwelling on it, is say the ways in which you've been complicit, either by your silence, because we recognize that silence is violence, or about your actual actions. Like, it is not just enough for the artists of color, specifically Black artists, to be calling out this poor behavior, because we have to re-traumatize ourselves to go back through it or what have you. And then the people that are being called out, like, at what point do we have a truth and reconciliation and say, like, yeah, I fucked up, like, damn, I'm sorry, this is the True Colors podcast, I messed up. Normally I just get by with saying the S word, but like, y'all, I'm mad. I've been mad all week.
Y'all be dropping F-bombs, Jamil. Come on.
I've been mad all week.
But I know.
But how can we say that, like, I messed up and here's where I'm accountable? Because as a producer, I said, hey, here's where I'm accountable. Here's when I put too much energy in white-serving, white-led organizations, and I did it to the detriment of myself, and I did it to the detriment of my community. Here's where I believed the lie that progress is slow, but it will eventually change. Here's where I pacified and okayed slow statements or statements of solidarity that weren't really tied to actions. Here's where I made those mistakes, but I can't no longer do that. I too, like you, am waiting to hear more funders, more producers, more actors, more playwrights, more directors who are non-Black say, here are the times when I messed up and I want to be part of fixing it. Because until people admit to it, I feel like we can't hold them accountable. And I think they know that.
Absolutely.
And they don't want to be held accountable.
Absolutely. I think also here is the, this first of all, we have to acknowledge that this is an extremely layered conversation.
Yes.
I mean, it's so layered. It's because with all that I'm saying, if my agents in New York call me today and say, there's a new show on Broadway, great role for you, that I'm going to get excited. Because I just want to do what I want to do.
Yeah, you're an artist.
And I want to do it at the pinnacle, right? That is, I am American as well. And what is it? We are bred. Whatever you do, be the best at it. Go for the gusto, right? And so this double consciousness that W.B. Du Bois talks about, that is spoken about, is real and true and should be honored. We should not feel conflicted in that. I think oftentimes, and you probably heard it too, Jamil, there's this circuit, well, be a part of their world. Okay, create it on your own. Be a part of their world. Create it on your own. Be a part of their world. Create it on your own. It's like, oh, please. Because if I create it on my own, unless I'm doing theater in my backyard, I have to depend on funders. I have to depend on this. I have to depend on that. If you look at For Color Girls, which was a monumental piece that was as Black as it could be, it was on Broadway, Black director, Black, but there were white funders who felt like for some reason this piece was important. You hear the conversation. I don't want to talk about Blackness. We need to talk about Blackness. But why we always got to talk about Blackness? It's a conversation that we're always trying to navigate. And at the end of the day, I just want to be a storyteller. I believe that my body in and of itself tells a story, and that the responsibility that I carry with this body, it's going to change the narrative anyway. That's why I don't believe in color black casting, but I digress. You know, that our bodies tell stories, that we come with a particular story. It doesn't matter whether the role was meant to be Black, and sometimes there's work in that way, but I do want, I think, Black folks and people of color, and I'm just going to specifically say Black people so that I don't always feel like I have to include everybody else, because I do think that there's a very specific journey that we have in this country. I want us to just kind of be easy on ourselves. I want us to be okay with wanting to be a part of other people's stories, to not feel that we're selling out, or we're that conflict between, well, you talking about what's wrong with it, stop waiting on. Let's relax. Hold up. We got bills. We have dreams. We have aspirations. There are stories that we read. One of my favorite musicals is Into the Woods. I can't wait to play the witch. I want to be the baker's wife. Stephen Sondheim was preaching all types of gospels in that musical. Word. I want to tell that story. You know, and I shouldn't have to apologize for that. But what you're speaking to is the fact that we all know that there are rooms, right? If we talk about the rooms, one of my Kevin.
I see Kevin.
I want you to be the baker's wife so bad. I love you, Kevin. He was the dance captain on Waitress, and I'm so glad that he's looking in. But you know, we gotta be easy on ourselves with these conversations. An actor made a wonderful video that has been spreading around social media. I sent it to you, where Griffin. He was calling some people out.
Yeah, let's just say Griffin Matthews. Yeah, Griffin. It's okay to say his name.
Yeah, and Griffin, and he was talking about his experience as a co-writer and lead actor on Witness Uganda, and it was powerful. And I have to be honest, one of the questions that I had in my mind is, and this wasn't a judgment, but it was just a question: would the same calling out have happened if he would have gotten a seat at the table? If, with all the things that had gone down that he talked about, his show was then picked up and went to Broadway, would that conversation be happening? It's a question I asked myself. What is it about for us in terms of liberation? Is it about bucking the system, redesigning the system, having a different system? Is it different if we're the one that gets the principal role? When do we do this? You understand what I'm saying? And I'm asking myself the same question. When do I turn a blind eye personally when I feel like I'm the one that's gotten a seat at the table? And I also have to say this. We know this from the history of our people being in this country. Revolution looks a lot of different ways. I used to be somebody who thought that it was just revolutionary to run away. And then as I got older, and I realized that it was also revolutionary to stay and to raise families and to try to love somebody and to just be alive, right? So I think that part of as we question, as we talk, as we toil, as we pray, as we cry, as we're angry, we also have to see how our very existence is a revolutionary act.
Yeah. And the resistance is in the existence. Yeah.
There you go. And we have to celebrate that. and give ourselves allowances, you know, for ways in which we have tried to play the game, ways in which we have turned in, you know, suppressed our own feelings about things that have been said to us and done to us, that it is not the selling out, it is the surviving, you know, and then try to see how to forge forward in the most honest and authentic way.
Maisha, you're so on point with a lot of that. I mean, I think one of the things that I hear you saying is that like Black people aren't monolithic, right? Like
No.
it has been the thing that we are screaming, and we have been screaming out for a long time when we talk about this, the different ways of existing and the different ways of being Black, and like there's no one way to do it. And I think definitely in moments like this, it's important for us to be reminded that, you know, that we aren't monolithic.
Right.
And as we have been talking about, you know, George Floyd, I think it's also important that we talk about Tony McDade, and that we are talking about the abuse Black trans men and women are feeling, because like I think that we can't, in our hurt and anger, if we aren't monolithic, we have to also be able to hold multiple truths at the same time, that there is state
Absolutely.
sanctioned violence on so many of our people, and that all of our people deserve that same level of justice. And I want to go back too about what you're saying, just making it theater specific, that I think that's such a hard thing. It's such a hard thing. Especially with artists of color, of a feeling that, all right, what is the pinnacle, right? Like that's actually a question. Like, what does it mean to do our art at the highest level and standard, and who set that? What is it that we believed? What is it about voice? What is it about reach? And you know, so I've had to challenge myself on that. Like, what does that really look like? What, you know, and recognizing that, you know, there are certain platforms, like again, you know, this is a True Colors podcast. We have more seats than a lot of the theaters in Atlanta. Like our Southwest Arts Center, where we perform at, holds 375. There aren't many theaters in Atlanta that hold as many seats as we do.
Right.
So in saying like, well, I want to do something at the pinnacle, I want to have the greatest reach. In Atlanta, you may not get a bigger reach than True Colors, right? So I think we also we just got to be really, we got to be really thinking about that sometimes too. And your words are reminding me about that point.
Yeah. It's complicated, Jamil. It really is. And I think we can allow it to be, because what we know as theater artists, you know, theater is a very special space. It's a special thing. It's a special place where we are allowed to be. We lean into the complex. We lean into the layered. We lean in. I think that I was talking to somebody, one of my friends who does mostly TV and film, and I was saying, you know, I think it's really powerful for me when I see people in Hollywood. I think about Joaquin Phoenix, who won all these awards, you know, for the Joker. And bless his heart, you know, every time he got up to receive one of these awards, he was just like, yeah, thank you. Everybody racist, all y'all racist, all this is racist. I just want to tell stories, but I'm just trying to let y'all know we got a long way to go, and this is all racist, the end. And there's a certain privilege that comes with that, but he's using his privilege to make sure that the light always shines. Marlon Brando did the same thing. I will always remember when he won for The Godfather, and this beautiful Native American woman, you know, appeared in his absence. It was like, Marlon Brando cannot be here until the injustice against Native American, like, period. It was like, I do this. This is what I do because I want to tell stories in this way, in this capacity, because let's be for me, I can only speak for myself. There is something about doing work in spaces where there is enough funding, outreach, room to sort of be as creative as you want to be. And I enjoy being in creative spaces where artists sort of match me in terms of talent, in terms of whatever the case may be, right? So that's one of the reasons why I have enjoyed being on a national tour, in a space with other Broadway actors, so to speak. The other thing that I have begun to find interest and sort of joy in is taking characters that I know have been written in a very archetype, racist sort of way, because the people writing them just don't know, and taking that woman and presenting them in an extremely layered way. That is something that I find interesting, because I've gotten to a place in my life where I can only be authentically me. Either you take it or you don't. So if you want me to be in that room, in the room where it happens, just know that this is what I'm bringing. And what I have found is that more often than not, the creatives lean into me. And they say, well, what is it that I'll give you an example. We were preparing, I was on the first national tour of Waitress. We were preparing it for the American stage. And so there were questions about, the producers wanted us to just look, if anybody's seen Waitress, it can be a little risque. It's about a woman who has an affair with her gynecologist. So there you go. And they were trying to look at moments where they might need to sort of water it down a bit for the Midwest, for the Bible Belt, X, Y, and Z. There's a reprise that happens in the second act, and there are these different sexual motifs. And you have one of the waitresses who's literally getting oral sex done on her. You have the main waitress who the gynecologist is giving her oral sex. And then you have my character, which at the time was being played by another young woman, who was having a sexual rendezvous with the chef of the diner. Oral sex, nothing even remotely close to oral sex. But that waitress happened to be Black. And so the conversation was only about that couple. They were oblivious, Jamil, and I knew they were. But because this is a lens that I have tightened and focused for my whole life, I see it. Oh, y'all think that duet is riskier than those two just because it's a Black female body. So you know what they did? Their moment, he's spanking her. They decided to flip it so that she was spanking him. Now my Black woman meters are all the way up, because I'm like, now you've desexualized her. Now she's being put in a position of power. This big white burly man is on hands and knees, and she's spanking him. Now where's the sensuality? So my Atlanta YEA Tri-Cities High School said, excuse me. And I'm gonna be honest, excuse me, Diane Paulus. It wasn't even my role. I was understudying it, but I had a question and I asked it in a respectful way on the side, and it was honored. I actually asked the assistant director first, but then the conversation ended up going to her. And then she honestly said, I hadn't thought about it like that. Because so much happens in our subconscious as racialized people in this country that we don't even realize. Something about that makes me uncomfortable, but I don't know what it is. I'll tell you what it is. This full-figure Black woman automatically feels more sexualized to you, and you don't even know the history behind it. And said all of that to say, that's why we have to become educated, because there are so many people who are in the room with me who are not Black, who have no idea what the ancient mama archetype is, or what over-sexualization is. Words that, in terms that we just kind of throw around, they don't even know. They're existing in this world, but their privilege allows them to sort of be here, and they don't even realize it. So I just wanted to give that as an example of how you can operate in a space and be your authentic self and speak about things that matter. Sometimes it'll be rejected. But that one time where my voice was heard, I was, rejected, called difficult, had an attitude, just for being myself. So it's just something we have to continue to navigate through.
Maesha, I don't even. I'm struggling with the questions, and I'm also struggling with my earpiece. But I'm struggling with the questions just because, like, what you're saying is so crucial, and I'm thankful for the folks in the comments for amening with you. But it's something that we just need to hear more, right? We need to hear how these moments, like you call them, ain't no such thing as a microaggression, right? It's all macro. But we need to hear more about how these things are being played out in rehearsal halls. And it's again, we've been having these conversations, those intra community conversations, but it needs to happen that like the people who have been placed in these leadership positions historically are doing so with sometimes willful, but all the time some ignorance, a level of ignorance to the fullness of the stories that they are desiring themselves to share. That they want to be inclusive, and so they want to write Black characters into their stories. They want to make sure, or at least they say they want to make sure, that their theaters are filled with the fullness of the human spirit and all this other stuff that they say.
Right.
But they walk into these rooms without the information that will actualize their desires. And I think, so period. The challenge that I'm feeling though is that, because like, hey, ignorance is a thing. Like that's a not knowing.
Right.
And it's okay. But it is when the things are being brought to you, what are you doing?
Right.
And like you said, in this moment, let's thank Corona for slowing us down and then equalizing all of us. We are all at home. We are all dealing with this.
Right.
1 in 4, like you said, are on unemployment. Now that you know, now what?
Right.
That's the thing that I'm really interested in is now what? Like, I've been like so many of us, tired, exhausted of having to speak up and show up and do it and seeing my colleagues doing it. And that's exhausting me, seeing my colleagues share articles, share posts, create them themselves. I'm interested to say now what? And what does that accountability look like? If you were a young artist getting into this and you are fresh out of grad school, fresh out of undergrad, just in the beginning of your career, and you're seeing all of this happen, what do you say to them right now, Maesha? Like, what do you say to the artist who is just looking for opportunity, regardless of where it comes from sometimes? What do you say to them about how they may want to navigate through this?
Go to therapy. Get in therapy. Find, and I mean that with all sincerity.
Yeah. Therapy is a real thing. Like, it's not a joke no more.
It's not. And your art can't be your only way of, right? Get in therapy if you're not already in therapy, because this is trauma, what we're talking about. Also, finding what was really important to me, and I feel like something has happened where mentorship has become something of the past, but the value of having some people, artists who you see and say, I love the way they operate. I love the way they seem to navigate through this. I love the way they speak about themselves within this space. I love that. I can't be you, but I want to sort of, the way you sort of navigate this thing reminds me of how I want to do it. That was a lifesaver for me.
Me too.
So I told you, I said, I don't want no parts of it. I was a full-time teacher for about 10 years. And then my calling tapped me on the shoulder. So I had no say in the thing. God was like, oh yeah, I know it's easy to tap out, but you have something to say. And so you're going to have to navigate this thing. You're going to have to do it with therapy. You're going to have to do it with mentorship. You're going to have to do it with courage. but you can't make that decision. I personally could not. And so that has been, and also I think it's really important, like I said, with my NYU education, you gotta have balance. You have to, there are a lot of actors, especially with the way that I personally don't, I think that saying that theater is going to go anywhere is strange for me as a person of African descent, because we live in ritual. So, you know what I mean? Ritual will always be a part of what we do. Storytelling, we're going to find a way to storytell, you know? So to have even a conversation about where theater is, I'm like, theater is in the community. So that's a moot point for me. But I do think it's been really beautiful to see with this time that people have been able to sit down. Hey, I think I might be interested in learning more about psychology. You know what? I think I want to do some more research. I love dramaturgy. I think I want to like research more about, you know, African history, or I think I want to playwright. Like, so many of my friends are finding the time to nurture other things that they are passionate about. I want to lean into what it actually means to be in a relationship. And those of people who are my artists, they understand you got to think about that thing. Because when you are just about booking and I want to move here, where we are at home when everybody else is at work. We at work when everybody else is at home. We not meeting nobody. That's a podcast. But I will say people are now starting to, you know, think about like, what else do I want to nurture? And that is so important, to be whole artists, so that when you're entering a space and you're navigating through this really difficult stuff, you have something else to sort of kind of keep you in balance, and this is not all that you are, and you're able to look at it from a distance and say, I am participating in a world, in a space that was created before I even got here. And I think that is the thing that we're all trying to navigate. I am a Black person living right now, but I'm carrying so much. And what white folks have to understand is they are also carrying the same thing. So I would also offer the same thing to them. If you're just being awoken, if you're feeling this, go to therapy, get you a Black therapist or a white therapist who you could talk to about these things, who's not going to let you off the hook, who's going to help you navigate these things. Don't ask your Black friends to help you navigate through it. Do the work on your own. Talk, you know, let them know that you're doing the work to be a better friend. But that would really be my and then last but not least, stay centered in yourself so that you can hear your own voice and you can do whatever the hell you want to do, and you don't have to explain that to anybody, Black or white.
Y'all, we are here with Maesha McQueen, who is dropping some gems for y'all, man. Like Maesha YEA Bread coming through and learning her time in Atlanta and just how that has shaped her values as an artist and shaped her journey. Maesha, before I let you go, you know that this is the year in which we're celebrating the She Griot. We are celebrating Black women storytellers all season long here at True Colors. And you know, we thanked Corona earlier for this opportunity to take a pause, but here's the moment where we get pissed off at Corona, because we could have been in rehearsal hall right now with you. We could have been putting up an amazing production, but we're gonna get back to it. Hopefully, we'll get back to it. Yeah. But let's talk about the She Griots in your life. Who are those mentors, those artists, those Black women whose stories helped fuel you and becoming the woman that you are?
Ooh, Lord. Well, I'm going to talk about some people who I consider to be part of my artistic tribe today.
Bet.
Jade Lambert Smith,
Mm-hmm.
Rashida Bumbray, Camille Brown. I look up to a lot of women who there are Black women who are doing what I do and are just such great women. And I could go on and on and on about them. But I was very inspired by Black women. I named a few, Beth Turner, um, who are working on the collegiate level, and are really trying to grab Black artists at that very, very important time. And I think that their work is so important, especially, me coming as an educator, like doing that work is really, really, really something. And then, they're just the people, the women, singers, dancers, actors who have come before us, and I can only imagine what they had to walk through, at a time when you were entertaining thousands of people but couldn't even come through the front door, or had to, just the ancestors who came before me, who paved the way for me. I hear them and I feel them, those Black artists and activists who just were a part of, the movement inside of the space, not standing outside, but we're literally inside of the space. The Ruby Dees and the Maya Angelou's and the Ntozake Shangays, and all the women who are the front lines now, Black women, Camilla Forbes, and just all of that. And I was going to say, in speaking about She Griots, I do feel, and this is kind of another nuanced point, I do feel that, today is Breonna Lewis's birthday. For those who don't know, she was the woman who was sleeping in her house, and officers came in and shot and killed her wrongfully. Her killers are still roaming free. That particular story hit me really, really hard. And I knew that it was because she was a woman and she was innocent. And when I say, innocent, I mean, like, I ain't had nothing to do with
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah. This ain't got nothing to do with me.
I do feel like the Black Lives Matter movement has a male face, has a masculine energy. And I understand for many reasons why,
A
because
cisgender Black male energy, right?
yes,
Like,
let's
yeah,
be
let's be real, but
specific.
yeah.
Yes, a cisgendered Black male energy, and I understand why, and I think that, as we advocate for all Black lives, we have to understand that there's a very specific target that are on Black men who are presented as cisgendered. That's I'm going to say that as my perspective. But I do feel that we are still, as Black women, trying to sort of say, hey, like, hey, I'm here. Like, I matter too. Like, hey, you know what I'm saying? And our resistance may look different. I think that Black women and Black, there's the whole, like, the Black people, but I do believe that there are very specific ways that both genders, that the individual genders are sort of targeted. And I think that those stories need to be told in a very specific way. And yeah. I also want to say this, Jamil, before we go. You were talking about responsibility. I was having a conversation with some people about this notion that we talk about responsibility on all different levels. I think casting directors need to become are a huge part of this conversation in our profession. You don't know how many casting directors, especially in New York and LA, tell white actors the reason why you didn't get this role is because they specifically wanted a POC. The reason why you didn't get this role is because they wanted a woman who was Black. The reason why we're not taking any white girls right now because we have too many of you. We're only taking people of color. What that lie does is it creates a sense of tension and divisiveness within our community. Stop lying to these people. Stop saying you didn't get the job because we wanted to go with the POC, because then people are carrying that story around and you feel it in the room. And then the idea is that you only got the job because you were a POC. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. So I had to kind of interject that because it's happening on so many different levels. You know what I mean?
Say that. Yes, I mean on so many different levels. The idea that the people who make it to these spaces, if they are Black or they are people of color, they don't deserve to be there. They didn't get there because of the strength of their talent and being on stage, but they got here through some type of quota system.
Right.
That's real. Like, and I have to remind people, like, sometimes the reason why you didn't get that job is because you weren't any good. Like your talent did not rise to the level.
I went right for
it. So like just that,
right.
And that's real, and we got to apply it all throughout the way. Like if that's what the story required, if your talent is what the story required, you would have been in that space. And yeah, that's
a huge thing in the Broadway community, a huge thing. So that's just all of those things we got to kind of, check. But
well, y'all, thank you very much, Maesha McQueen, for joining us on the True Colors podcast. This is True Colors podcast number 11.
Yes.
Like we do every Thursday at 1 p.m. We have a different guest. Y'all tune back. Next week, my guest will be Pearl Clegg. We're going to make up for last week when we missed her last week. But
Pearl Clegg, can I put her name in the hat too?
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Maesha, man, I'm sending you strength. I'm sending you love. Of course, I'm sure we'll text each other after this gets off.
Give each other a hard time.
Yeah, that's what we do. But y'all, thank you again so much for coming out. I forgot to put the fundraiser here on this podcast, but if you want to support True Colors, please go truecolorstheater.org. Right now we're doing Power to Give, so the city of Atlanta will match your gift. For every dollar you give, they will give one back too. So thank you all so very much for your support. Keep rocking with us. Keep pushing the people in your community to do better. Use your platforms to push for progress. If you are silent, your silence is violence. All right. Thank you guys very much for doing all that you all do. Shout out to you all. Get some rest.
Yes, take care of yourselves, everyone. Thank you, Jamil.
Yeah. Go get some therapy. Everybody get some therapy.
Everybody.
All right, Maesha, bye.
Bye.